hosted by the Urban Robotics Foundation called Mobile Robots in Public Spaces. Are you ready? And we are thankful for our sponsor today, the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, and you'll hear more about them later on in the session. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to start with a sobering thought from our Executive Director, Bern Grush. And that is, it's a quote from our Discovery Guide, and I think it's also in the Executive Guide. We have never before put machines that move freely among unprotected, untrained humans without proximate human oversight and or direct mechanical control. At the Urban Robotics Foundation, we are waving the red flag to make sure that all stakeholders are aware of the risks and the rewards of preparing for what we believe is the inevitable deployment of public area mobile robots. So while we all know that technology is accelerating faster than ever, we are here to help regulators and policymakers find ways to prepare and adapt to the innovations, and to ensure that tech innovators find ways to bridge the gap between prototypes and pilot projects and what it will take to scale for commercial success. My name is Lee St. James. I'm the Managing Director of the Urban Robotics Foundation. Bern, who I just mentioned in our initial quote, is also going to be presenting today, and we are the co-authors of the Executive Guide to Public Area Mobile Robots, first published in January of this year. You see more about our bios on the screen there, but I'm just going to jump right into a big thank you to those of us who are members, sponsors, and partners who make our work possible, especially the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, who are sponsoring today's webinar. Richard could not be here in person today, but we have two video segments that explain what CITM is and what opportunities there might be for funding and other benefits by joining CITM as a client. If you're not already a member of URF or a client with CITM, we invite you to join both organizations, and we'll have more information about that at the end of our session today. So today's agenda is inspired by our Executive Guide to PMRs, What You Need to Know. I will take us through the first three agenda items, and Bern will cover items 4 to 6. This is designed to be a relatively informal webinar, so please feel free to enter any questions in the chat, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A after we cover our material. I'll also be monitoring the chat. Bern will be monitoring it while I'm talking, and I'll be monitoring it while he's talking. And if there's anything urgent, we're more than happy to interrupt and address your questions right away. So let's start with the definition, and this is in the Executive Guide as well, which is that a public area mobile robot is a wheeled or legged ambulatory ground-based device. So we're not including drones and air-based devices at this point. And it's designed to travel along public shared pedestrianized pathways without the use of visible human assistance or physical guides. So what that means is, and it really covers on the next thing, is they're defined by where and how they're being used. So they operate in public spaces where pedestrians, pets, people in wheelchairs, and other active transport users have rights of way, and it's operating amongst bystanders. So it's not in a warehouse or a factory where all of the employees around the robot are trained and are sort of responsible in terms of that sort of liability overview. Another way of defining or looking at the robots is to look at the whole ecosystem of robots. Obviously, industrial robots have been around for quite some time now, mobile robots more recently. But again, they sort of started in those warehouses and factories where there was an opportunity to really control how they were being used. Public area mobile robots are more recent, and there's a subset of PMRs that's getting most of the press right now, which is the personal delivery devices, the food deliveries on university campuses and other types of devices, but they're really just a subset of the PMRs. And the use cases for these public area mobile robots are growing dramatically. So when you think about how municipalities and public facility operators, all the different tasks that they're responsible for, robots are being developed in ways that address the labor shortages and some of the other key challenges that these organizations face. Another way of looking at this, and because my personal favorite is a social robot, is to really think about how robots operate. And you'll see a couple of examples here. One is a crossing guard robot, another one is a garbage or waste collection robot. I believe that waste collection robot is actually, well, I know for sure that it was launched in 2006, so 18 years ago, but it doesn't appear to have gained much traction. So there is definitely a challenge in terms of scale and organization. But let me also go to, this area of social robots that I mentioned. So social robots have been used for over 20 years. So there are little, robotic animals and things like that that wouldn't be considered mobile. And then there are versions of these robots that are used in long-term care and other schools and daycares and things like that. There is an overlap with public area mobile robots when they're used in public spaces. So in sort of well, this is an example. This is a photograph actually of the robot in a private retirement home, but there are places that you'll see that these robots are being used in retail stores and things like that, where they could be considered in public spaces. So that's a little overview of sort of what they're defined. So many of you who are on the call, I know you're very new to the Urban Robotics Foundation. We're excited to see all the new people joining us today. You may have seen this story before, but I just want to be clear that we're not including manufacturing warehouse robots or farming and agricultural robots. We're not including drones, as I mentioned, or electric scooters and e-bikes. And we're also not including autonomous or automated vehicles. They're out of scope for the work that the Urban Robotics Foundation is focused on, which is related to the international standard for which Bern is the global lead. But there may be overlapping regulations and considerations for deployment with any of these devices. So it's really about bringing the stakeholders together and making sure that even though we're focused specifically on public area mobile robots, you will see us and hear in our blogs and things like that, conversations about related technologies. And certainly when you hear the video from CITM, that's included as well. It's really important to understand right now that the market for these mobile robots is growing exponentially. There are not too many industries in the world that are growing at almost 15% a year. So this global mobile robot market is expected to grow in value to $40.6 billion by 2028. And then if you just look at that last mile delivery segment of the market that I showed you earlier, the combined annual, this combined annual growth rate is estimated to exceed 25%. Now, I know it's coming from a small base, but it's really about the amount of innovation going on and advancements in robotics technology and the new players that are coming on board. And so we do really see a huge expansion of this market. And although there are companies that are closing or being bought out, there are all kinds of new innovators coming to bear, including some of the people who are on our call today. There's another section in the executive guide where we talk about the impact of doing nothing. So what is it? What's the risk if municipalities or public facility operators don't take actions now? They're not in a crisis related to these devices. We actually had a membership call last summer with a city where they're like, we don't really see too many of these on our streets right now, so we're just going to wait and see. And the challenge with that kind of wait and see approach is really that there are so many huge factors that are driving the last mile. And I'm going to draw on this. I'm going to read from this World Economic Forum report that was done in 2020. And it really says, well, let me just read this here. There's never been a time of greater change for the last mile. Consumers order more things online, expecting more control and faster deliveries. Inner cities are struggling with traffic congestion and air pollution due to the increasing number of delivery vehicles, their emissions, and second lane parking. These developments are not surprising, but they are challenging because they're not linear. Rather, they are interwoven in complex ways that reinforce their speed and magnitude. So this really is an illustration, and again, you can read more detail on this in the executive guide, is that from 2019 to 2030, they're expecting a huge increase in the number of delivery vehicles, almost 2 million more delivery vehicles. And this is across the top 100 cities in the world. An increase in carbon emissions by three thirty. I think it's that. I should have done my math here. 6 over 18 is like 30%, 33%. And then in terms of the average commute time in minutes, we all know how desperate it is driving around in the Toronto market. I don't know where everybody else is from, but certainly commuting times are just going to get worse and worse. So waiting and seeing how it impacts is really not an option, especially when we look at the market forecast that we just mentioned in terms of like 15% a year and then 25% for the delivery focus. So again, in the executive guide, we talk about the conclusions, and we're thrilled to read what the World Economic Forum concluded at the time, which is really aligned with how we're operating at the Urban Robotics Foundation. It says, we encourage private and public players to team up and accelerate the rollout of pilots on the suggested interventions. Also, we believe there is tremendous value in building discussion networks or consortiums for cities to exchange the most effective methodologies, discuss challenges, and liaise with private sector players. Very, very aligned with what we're doing. So now I'm going to take you through a word from our sponsor. I'm hoping that the volume is set appropriately. So please just say something. You turn on your volume if you can't hear Richard. But this is a little 4-minute segment from Richard. And then when that wraps up, I'm going to hand it over to Bern.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Dunda. I am the director of something called the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, or CITM, which is part of the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, or OVIN. Today, we're going to get a short synopsis of OVIN and CITM, and then turn you back to the Urban Robotics Foundation. So OVIN is the province's flagship program for driving innovation in the automotive and mobility sectors. They do that in a number of ways: research, grant dollars, partnering, economic development. I'll share a little bit more on the slide. And OVIN has been very successful at recreating the automotive and mobility sector in the province. To date, the province has seen over 43 billion in net new investments, and that doesn't include the government funding in there. That's just private sector investment from an array of partners that you can see on the right. That includes 3 new battery plants now, cathode and anode plants, various pieces of the battery and electrified vehicle supply chain, battery recycling, as well as innovation within the vehicles. So that's a massive amount of investment, putting Ontario on great footing for a long time to come as transportation electrifies. OVIN as a program has been around since 2018 and has invested in first connected and autonomous technologies, as well as electrified vehicle technologies and powertrains, which includes batteries as well as fuel cell and hydrogen, as well as infrastructure. It's had a pretty significant impact in the province. Over 4,600 jobs created, almost 560 startups or small and medium enterprises supported, over 650 jobs created in the province, 537 million in follow-on investment. The program manifests in a number of ways: generally ecosystem engagement, where there's a business development team and sector managers that are out there engaging industry and corporate and small business partners, strategic partnerships, workforce strategy and training to move an entire labor force that's geared to building internal combustion engines and vehicles into electrified vehicles of all sorts, as well as whole new modes of transportation and transportation solutions. There are a number of grant programs for startups, talent offset grants, smaller technology grants up to $100,000 that kind of build first minimum viable product, and then larger grants up to $1 million for technology and deployment to get the product ready for commercialization. As I mentioned, CITM is part of the OVIN network, or the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. We work with startups. We're a tech accelerator located in Hamilton, but our clients are spread throughout the province. And in general, they work in one of 5 areas. Right? And then keep in mind, and during this thing, when I say vehicle, I mean anything from a sidewalk delivery robot all the way up to a train, basically anything with wheels or the technology that drives that. So they're working in connected and autonomous vehicle systems, or smart vehicles, We have a smart connected vehicle, then you're also on the digital or smart transportation infrastructure side, whether that's within a city or on a highway. Now we're working with electrified vehicles and alternative powertrain technologies, whether that's batteries and new kinds of electric motors or fuel cells and hydrogen combustion engines. That brings you in the electric and hydrogen energy infrastructure because new powertrains and new types of fuel, as well as we see companies working in what I'll call transportation as a service solution that manage the transportation of a person or a good through various modes of transportations. So a pretty rich array of technology clients in the startup space that we're working with at CIP. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Again, I'm Richard Dunda. You can see my email there. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. Now I'll turn it back over.
Okay, we'll hear the rest of that video from Richard afterwards, and now I'm going to hand it over to Byrne.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, CITM, for your sponsorship for today's meeting, and thank all of you who are attending today as well. So let's look at some of the forward-thinking places where PMR technology can take us, and some of the things that we need to be ready with. According to this table, which is from the executive guide, there are opportunities for many stakeholders. So starting at the top with municipal and urban planners, they can look at improved services for underserved areas, public safety, sanitation, asset management as examples. We're all familiar with last mile delivery. That's been mentioned already a couple of times. I want to tell you, as an interesting example, I just recently have been involved with a project to move medical supplies from a hospital source of those supplies to patients being monitored in their homes. And that is in an effort to reduce not long-term, but to reduce healthcare costs. Very, very valuable application of that kind of delivery technology. Facility operators, we already see a lot of robots inside hospitals, airports, retail facilities. It's a pretty common sight in many cities to see those operating inside those facilities. It's not necessarily the city so much as facility operators. There are already many projects in many places for disability communities, for access, for safety, as well as for grocery and pharmaceutical deliveries. In fact, you saw one of the slides earlier, a road crossing robot, which is, you saw a student in that case, but that's also usable for seniors as well. Many of the tasks that PMRs address are now done with larger motor vehicles, and this technology helps shrink the footprint of those activities. Again, that was pretty clearly mentioned by Lee a few slides ago. Our point is, if we do this thoughtfully, we can improve a number of liability, traffic, and safety issues within our public active transportation domain. So here are several quick examples. 4 of these are for delivery applications, which are currently the most popular commercial application. Not at all the only application, certainly, as we'll see more of that soon. On the upper right is one that is following its owner. It's called Follow Me Robot, and it's not fully autonomous. It's tethered, electronically tethered to a device that's in the pocket of that person. So this is kind of an edge case. This is not the central case for PMRs, but it's important to ask if this will be regulated. Will it be regulated to help seniors and persons with a disability, or will it become a common private robot with possibly unintended consequences? I think you can appreciate if a lot of people used something like this. So the one in the bottom center, one of my favorites, is designed to pick up cigarette butts with a small vacuum. So such small, quiet street cleaners can become quite common in the foreseeable future if we want them to be. Those are already operating from a company in Denmark. On the flip side of opportunity is a matching body of challenges. Again, from the top moving down, planners need to consider infrastructure, safety, regulations, and other items to guard against unintended consequences. If PMRs begin to scale from the logistics applications, we will confront traffic orchestration concerns. This has already cropped up in one city in California. It's a very small number of robots, but there can be conflicts at intersections if these operators are not coordinated, and that's why we need that orchestration element. Standard addresses that. For facility operators, robots for maintenance and inventory management need extra customer care to ensure public safety and acceptance. Environmental advocates are concerned for battery recycling and sidewalk congestion. And so far, the general public has exhibited lots of curiosity and amusement, as well as confusion and concern. So it's a little bit of each. Some people love these robotic services, others do not. Standards and regulations will help here, but the way forward is not fully understood yet. So here's a few examples of the from the infrastructure aspect. This is the manner in which we currently manage pedestrian spaces, as shown in these extreme cases, is more than simply a challenge. It's an absolute barrier. These robotic operators could work around these. I mean, this doesn't stop them from operating, but it stops them from accessing multiple places. But we want to ask ourselves, if this is how we treat our pedestrian spaces, what about people in wheelchairs? So there's a common element of how we take care of these spaces for our wheelchair users and other pedestrians and these robots. So there's a kind of a common area of concern. I think we can see them both at play. I want to take a look at the full spectrum of issues right from the bottom up. So we're reading from the bottom in this case at layer 1. PMRs move in many ways, as mentioned already, wheels, legs, or tracks. Moving up, they operate in an infrastructural domain that have planning considerations, and those include the need for real-time mapping capabilities. You can see some of the issues previously in the previous slide. You can have garbage day, and so you can't use the sidewalk on that day, for example. So there's a real-time element to that mapping. At layer 3, PMRs require operating context, power, insurance, safety systems at traffic intersections. A very big issue about how these will cross intersections, what kind of V2X technology we'll need there, and so forth. At layer 4 are the tasks and use cases for the PMR fleets are intended to accomplish, as we saw earlier. Examples are maintenance, delivery, security, many others as well. And at the very top layer, that's the layer we're interested in here, is to make all this work in our cities and facilities are critical issues of governance and deployment. So this top layer is the core concern for the work of the Urban Robotics Foundation. It's addressed by our work with the ISO standard 4448 and our guidance work and our quite new work in the area of regulatory modeling. It's all related to the deployment of these standards. You can tell from the list at the top that there's a large number of governance and deployment concerns. Physical safety is critical throughout, but urban workability as PMRs move amongst other mobile humans, whether pedestrian or cyclist or micromobility user or automobile driver, are all equally important. So we have developed 6 pillars of deployment for PMRs, and these are very quickly: municipal readiness, PMR behavior, traffic orchestration, fleet certification, enforcement, and monetization. These will all evolve as PMRs diversify and scale. This is not like we're really a few of us are at the readiness stage. All of this, the rest of this is in the future, the other 5 stages. But what's important is our work at the Urban Robotics Foundation is independent of the task and mode of mobility. In other words, we're independent of whether PMRs are teleoperated or autonomous. We're independent of whether they are on wheels or legs. And we are independent of whether they operate indoors or outdoors. Pretty important to see that this is not just about delivery robots, which is again the prime interest if you see these, if you view these things through YouTube, then you'll see a very limited understanding. So following from all of this that I've just said, governance and readiness include a large number of responsibilities and concerns. A few of them are traffic orchestration, enforcement, licensing, certification, crash reporting, vandalism, and so on, as you see here. There's many, many more than that. Just a sample of what you need to be concerned about from a governance perspective. As this technology scales, we're going to also require changes in our traffic court, police reporting, municipal insurance, and others. So it is our work at the Urban Robotics Foundation to consider what all this implies while drafting standards, deployment guidance, regulatory models for their management. So here are let's look at just one example. This is PMR behavior while waiting at an intersection. It's one tiny behavior, it's pretty important behavior, is one tiny element. How should they behave? So here are some of the possible types of behaviors that we could induce via PMR orchestration as drafted in the ISO 4448. Can you turn a few more of those up, Lee, for us? I think you can see the problem with some of these. What we really want are robots that are polite, transparent, non-congesting, and always deferential to pedestrian access. The ISO 4448 addresses solutions to many of these, and many more have been suggested by our members since 2020. But still, we're not perfectly all the way there yet. But we welcome you on this call to contribute as well. Join us, help us to minimize these unexpected edge cases. As you can see, our work is not about innovating robotic hardware or software. Many, many thousands of people are already working on that worldwide. From the name Urban Robotics Foundations, many people think we make or write or design robots. We do not. We have no interest in the actual physical robot itself. We're strictly concerned about acceptability, adoption of mobile robots operating in public spaces among non-involved humans. It's really about livability and the people that are around these robots. So our guidebooks and regulatory models encourage livable deployment. Our work on standards helps generate a pathway to this industry. So before I wrap up, I have one more slide after this. Is I want to make sure that you understand two critical things. First, if we can make all of this work for the accessibility community, we can make it work for all of us. Secondly, without standards, there will be no effective industry, no matter how clever our machines become. So finally, my last slide, I want to underscore even clearly, our work is not nearly enough. Cities that permit these technologies will need to govern them. We're simply a research standards author and regulatory model writer. We are not regulators. We are not operators for these systems at all. We're really essentially a resource. Cities that permit these technologies will need to govern them, and this will require leadership far beyond the technology. Accessibility, equity, political and social dimensions are all critical. In small cities or facilities, it will be possible for a single person or department to lead early trial and pilot projects. As PMR scale to multiple fleets from multiple providers, performing multiple types of tasks in multiple domains, in multiple places, operational integration will be required, and this will impact many different departments. While the Urban Robotics Foundation develops standards, deployment guidance, and regulatory models, it is the municipalities and regional governments that will create the regulations and systems to form framework for scalability and ensuring urban livability. Thank you. Back to you, Lee.
Well, with that, thank you so much, Bern. I wanted to open up our Q&A with a quote that we've received, or a testimonial from Michael Senna, who's the co-author of The Real Case for Driverless Mobility. And he's recently wrote this to us. He said, "I applaud and encourage any effort to avoid the disastrous effects of thoughtlessly putting vehicles into the transportation mix that has often occurred with e-scooters and e-bikes. For example, one city I know well allowed the companies to flood the streets with e-scooters and e-bikes, even waiving one-way restrictions for them with disastrous consequences. The city's new government is finding it extremely difficult to gain control of a situation that was totally out of control when it took over. Set the rules first, then make sure everyone plays by those rules. I applaud URF for its great initiative." As Bern and I both mentioned, we have two publications that are available right now for everyone to access. The executive guide really addresses what we discovered, what are PMRs, why should we look at them now, what do we really need to understand as a starting point, and that's available as a free download from our website. We also have the discovery guide available for purchase, and it really addresses more about how do we proceed, when, for what tasks, how do you prepare to pilot and deploy these devices. And if you are a member, obviously, then you get some benefits, including a 50% discount on any of our publications. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me for that. Membership is open to a whole range of stakeholders, as we said in the beginning. Really, this is about building a consortium or a nonprofit organization with global members, and we're really committed to ensuring that all players are working together, sharing best practices, getting pilot studies underway, and sharing those findings. So lots of research. I know there was a question in the chat about that research project that Byrne mentioned, and we'll address that shortly. And so now is our time for open discussion and comments. I'm going to stop the share for a moment while we do our Q&A, and then I do have one more video from CITM to wrap up. So any of those innovators in the audience, there's a really in-depth review from Richard of some of the types of clients that CITM has and the type of resources and benefits that you can get from joining them. And we'll play our video. Thank you again to Richard and the team at CITM.
CITM, for its size, has a pretty impressive ecosystem of partners. On the left, you see an array of the startup companies that we work with. I'll mention a couple. Oper is an electrified motorcycle company whose first market is Brazil. It is a software-defined motorcycle, much the same way a Tesla is a software-defined car. Switch is a electrical charging management company that partners with residential building owners to manage the charging vehicles in commercial and residential condominiums. Enidine makes a next generation electric motors. Mesomat makes a super smart tire management system that has sensors embedded in tires. Accessium makes accessible technology for vehicles for handicapped individuals. Ride Alike has a ride sharing service, and the list goes on. All of that takes a pretty large network of partners, all the way from our education partners at Mohawk and McMaster, through our kind of our services and delivery partners, anything from a legal firm to engineering and design and consulting firms, and some of our larger corporate partners who sponsor things like our Innovation Challenges program, Nokia and Magna, or companies that are looking to access innovation on a regular basis. To service our startup clients, CITM provides a number of services. We are actually a telco. We operate our own private 4G and 5G network in Hamilton. So for companies that need to test 4G and 5G connectivity in some sort of vehicle, we can provide that. We partner, as I mentioned, with engineering and design services companies to help our startups build their products. We have a virtual reality platform for digital twinning. We run something called an Innovation Challenge program, which I'll share a bit on shortly. We have a data store to help companies that are doing AI and data modeling. As well, we provide a pretty deep set of technical and business mentorship programs to help our startups get their businesses off the ground. Our Innovation Challenges program is our flagship program. At its core, this program matches industry or commercial partners who have a technology problem and are looking for innovation. So they articulate what's called a challenge statement, and we take that challenge statement to market and provide them access to small companies that are innovating in that space. So saves them time, energy, and money, and help accelerate their own commercialization and product strategies. And our challenge partners include companies like Nokia, Magna, Parsons Engineering, Geotab, and some of the innovative small companies we've seen. You can see the logos here, but there's a pretty impressive array. If you have interest in this program, please contact me at richard.dunda@citm.ca. And I'll just mention our conference, which runs every November, the Future of Transportation and Mobility Series, or FTMS. This year it's on November the 7th. It's a virtual event. By virtue of being virtual, it has international reach. We have about 25 countries that participate in this event. Given Ontario's footprint in the industry, we've been able to attract some pretty interesting speakers. Toyota, Nexstar, who is Chrysler Stellantis' battery manufacturing plant in Windsor, Invest Ontario, Owners, Magna, and the list goes on. You can watch last year's event at ftms.citm.ca. Registration for this year's will be open sometime in the early fall, so watch for that.